When it comes to the Creek Fire, the Bobcat Fire, the North Complex, and the August Complex, there have been some major updates in the last 24 hours, and there's some tricky things in the weather forecast. So we've got a lot to talk about, so let's just dive straight in. First thing we'll do is look at the satellite imagery here, where you can see things for the most part look a little less smoky than yesterday. You can still see some smoke up by the August Complex and the Castle Fire, and this thick layer over the Central Valley, but for the most part, I would say things are looking up. Now, that's going to be good when it comes to air quality, and you can see that the forecast for today is looking better than it was yesterday. Clearly, we still have some areas around the Castle and Creek Fire and the August and North Complex that are still very unhealthy, but it doesn't look like we still have those hazardous regions. Now, the forecast for tomorrow is looking even better. The very unhealthy air should be getting pushed out of the region, and then the Bay Area is finally out of that unhealthy range that it seems like it's been in for the last 3 weeks. Now, the major reason for this improvement in air quality isn't actually due to a decrease in fire behavior. As we'll talk about, the fire behavior the next few days should actually be increasing. But the winds are going to be increasing as well, which will be able to push some of that smoke out. The main reason for that is this low pressure that's going to be moving into the area sometime on Thursday. Now, the exact timing of this is extremely important because this is going to really play a big role in what ends up happening with these fires. You can see this low should move in sometime Thursday night. That's what the models are saying right now. And the reason that's important is because of the winds that it will be bringing with it. So you see, this is what the winds are doing right now, and this is why some of the air quality will be improving as you see those strong winds pushing into the region, and this is doing a few things. Now, it's kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to these winds because, one, they're pushing some of the smoke that has actually been covering up our fires and keeping temperatures down and winds down in the past. So once that smoke gets pushed out, we actually will see an increase in fire behavior. Now, the good news to these winds is they're going to be coming from the ocean. So once that cold front moves in Thursday night, we should see a reduction in temperatures and a rise in relative humidity, which will certainly help firefighters battle these blazes. Now, the first fire I want to talk about is the Creek Fire here, because this had some big updates in the last 24 hours and especially last night. Now, I will remind you that the southern edge of this fire has really been being helped by the Castle Fire here over the last really 3 or 4 days, as the Castle Fire has been creating just a ton of smoke that has been blocking that southern edge and keeping temperatures down. As you can see though, the fire behavior for the Castle Fire has reduced from what it looked like yesterday. Again, this shows the fire perimeter, and then these red dots are hotspots. And as you can see, there's a lot less hotspots than we have been seeing with the Castle Fire in the past. Now, obviously that's good news for the Castle Fire, but it's actually bad news for the Creek Fire because it's no longer going to be getting all that smoke that has been keeping the temperatures down. So the first place I want to focus on with the Creek Fire is this southern edge. And the reason I want to talk about this is because last night we saw some really active fire behavior in the southern edge, as what you get are called down canyon winds during the nighttime hours. That basically means that during night, the winds flow downhill, and what that did was spread some of this fire here. Now, the good news is during the day, the winds will shift back uphill, so firefighters will hopefully be able to put out some of these hotspots and get some new lines established that were crossed last night. The other good news in the south is as this pushes out of the dead timber and into the brush and grasslands, we should see the fire behavior be a little bit easier to manage for firefighters. Now, the one other thing I'll mention for the south here is, like I was saying, we're expecting the smoke to clear in this region. Now, when the smoke clears, that means the inversion is breaking. Now, don't worry about the word inversion. Think of it more like a flue of a fireplace. When you open up the flue, you get all that rising smoke out of your chimney. And what that does is it allows air to mix and new air to flow into the fire, which increases fire behavior. So I know firefighters in this area are really going to be looking out for that smoke clearing because that could lead to a rapid increase in fire behavior and rate of spread. Now, the next place I want to look at is this north zone because this has really been the area of the fire that has been increasing the fastest and has the most extreme fire behavior. The main thing we've been seeing in this north zone is spotting. And the main reason for that is due to the south winds that have been just picking up burning embers here and then tossing them ahead of the fire, which is called spotting. You can actually see that on this map where ahead of the fire, you get a new little fire starting. And then that's going to burn and it leads to a rapid increase in fire. So you can actually see that perfectly on this map here. This is the WRF-S fire model, one of the best wildfire models in the world. This was developed by Adam Kochanski, who is faculty at San Jose State, and one of my professors actually. So in this model, this is one of the few models that actually pairs the fire with the atmosphere above it. And when I play this animation, you'll see a perfect example of what that spotting actually looks like. So with those south winds, you're going to see a little spot fire start right around here and there and there, and then the main fire will join with that spot fire to really lead to some active fire growth. That's what has been happening in this north zone. That's what's going to continue to happen as those south winds increase. So when it comes to the creek fire numbers, it says it's at 220,000 acres, but this number is likely to have a big jump because they weren't able to get some new good infrared data on this fire perimeter. So when they do get that new infrared data, we're likely to see this number jump up pretty significantly, especially considering it grew in the south and north last night. Containment is at 16%. That's up from yesterday, which is good news, and I expect that to go up as they get some more control on that southern edge. As always, when it comes to evacuations, the link is in the description. There's too many for me to possibly go over, but CAL FIRE always says if your location is on this list, please evacuate so that they can do their jobs. Now, when it comes to the structures destroyed, this number is unfortunately up. We're at 473 structures destroyed, but this number is up as well. We now have over 2,600 personnel on this fire, 29 crews, 18 helicopters, 281 engines, 76 dozers, and 66 water tenders. Now, when it comes to these helicopters, that's actually another positive to the smoke clearing. I know aerial operations have been kind of at a minimum because the smoke has been so thick they can't see anything. So as that smoke clears, they're going to be able to use these helicopters and aircraft to really start fighting this fire. Now, when it comes to the forecast, really for this area and all the fires for that matter, the big thing we're going to be looking for is that cold front that's going to be coming in sometime on Thursday that will, one, bring the gusty winds, but will also bring lower temperatures and higher humidity. For the next 2 days, though, I'm not going to lie, the fire conditions are going to be pretty tricky. And the main reason for that is the temperatures are remaining warm. It's not triple digits, but it is the high 80s. And then we do have these gusty winds, especially in the afternoons. You can't really see it on this map, but we have been experiencing some 20 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts associated with that new southerly flow. Now, the other thing to worry about with the creek fire is the humidities in the overnight hours have been staying extremely low. And we saw the importance of that last night as the overnight hours, which typically are the time where firefighters can gain some containment, that dry air and those down canyon winds really led to some fire growth. The good news is once that cold front comes in Thursday night, these humidities during the nighttime hours should start to go up, which will certainly help firefighters. So the next fire I want to talk about is the Bobcat Fire. And the reason we're talking about the Bobcat Fire next is there was some big updates with this one as well, and really for a lot of the same reasons as the creek fire. We had some active fire behavior last night, and especially in the southern region where there were a couple spot fires. You can actually see some of the spot fires on this map outside of the previous fire perimeter, even one in this populated area. I'm hoping that has been put out at this point. And what these spot fires have done is really break some of the previous containment lines that we thought we had. So the containment number for this fire has actually been reduced from yesterday. The main area of growth for this one is in the western edge. And out of really all the main fires that we have right now, the fire behavior has been the most extreme on this western edge of the Bobcat Fire. Reason for that, there are some fuels that are critically dry, have not been burned in 60 years, and as this fire gets into those, it's leading to what's called crowning, where the fire jumps up off the ground into actually the trees and spreads across the trees. And then we've seen spotting up to a mile. And then once that spot happens, they're saying there's a 90 to 100% chance of ignition. So once the spot happens, it's basically starting a new little fire and then leading to more rapid fire growth. So when it comes to the Bobcat Fire, actually one thing I will say about this one, the majority of the growth is expected in the southwestern region. And then for the rest of the fire, they're not actually expecting that much more growth. So I guess that's some good news is for the majority of this fire, they're not really expecting much more growth. So getting into the numbers for the Bobcat, you can see it's up to 41,000 acres. That is up from yesterday, and the percentage of containment is actually down. So that's never what we want to see, but I know CAL FIRE or the separate agencies that are on this fire are working hard to gain some containment. We now do have over 1,000 personnel. Resources have been a huge issue for this fire just due to the scarcity of resources because there's 29 major blazes going on across California. So it's good to see that they're finally up over 1,000 personnel. When it comes to the forecast, I would say the forecast for the Bobcat Fire is looking the worst out of all of the fires we're going to be talking about. The main reason for that is this temperature on Wednesday getting up to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, where there is some positive is the winds in this region haven't been as high, although you can see there are some gusts in those afternoon hours getting up to 16, 20 miles per hour. So that's really the main concern with the forecast for the Bobcat Fire is those afternoon hours where we get into the mid to high 90s, we get an increase in winds, and then we have relative humidities in the teens to 20s. So I'm certainly going to be watching this, especially once that cold front moves in and we could see some gusts into possibly the 30s. So the next fire I want to talk about is the North Complex. And out of all the fires going on right now, I would say that I'm feeling best about the North Complex. And the main reason for that is we didn't actually see all that much growth yesterday. And that's surprising because this was the area that actually had a red flag warning yesterday, and they reached critical thresholds in temperature, humidity, fuel moisture, and winds. So that's basically ticking all the boxes for what you don't want to see for a fire. But even given those tricky fire conditions, there wasn't actually really any increase in fire behavior last night. You can see there still is a pretty significant hotspot on this northern edge. And while the southern edge remains the top priority because that's near the populated areas, this northern edge is really the area I'm expecting possible fire growth to happen. The main reason for that is as those southerly winds push in, they're expecting possibly 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts Thursday night with that cold front. So that's really going to test some of the lines that they have in this region. Now, when it comes to the numbers for the North Complex, you can see that the acreage did go up. It says 269,000 acres, but the reason for that increase isn't actually due to an increase in fire growth. It's due to better infrared mapping. So that's why we had an increase in acreage here. And you can see containment is up to 39%. That's why I am feeling good about this fire. They had about as tricky weather conditions as you can have. Acreage didn't increase, and they actually increased containment. So that's some great news there. Where the bad news comes in with this one is with the damages and losses. We're now up to over 700 structures destroyed, and there are now 15 fatalities associated with this fire. To put that in perspective, the North Complex is now the 5th deadliest wildfire in the history of California. And then when it comes to damages, CAL FIRE has put out a map where you can actually click in here, and while this is preliminary data, you can get a basic estimate of possibly what has happened with your house, whether it's been destroyed, minor damage, or no damage at all. The link for that is in the description. With all that being said, my thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who has been affected by this fire, and hopefully this is the last time I have to say these numbers have increased. Some good numbers that have increased have been the number of personnel on this fire. We now have over 3,500 personnel, which is the most I've seen on a fire this season. We have 90 crews, including a couple coming down from Canada to help out. We have 48 helicopters, 240 engines, 91 dozers, and 109 water tenders. So that's part of the reason I think that the containment has been so great with this fire in the last 24 hours, because there is a lot of resources working hard to control this blaze. Now, when it comes to the forecast for this area, it looks like it's still going to be tricky for the next 2, possibly 3 days. Temperatures remain high, but then you can see once that cold front moves in, it's actually a perfect little graphic right there, because we have this rapid fire behavior right here. Cold front's going to move in, and then things will be getting better. Now, I know Saturday says it's going to get up to 87, but I don't really see that happening, and I typically don't trust a weather forecast past 3 days out anyway, so take that with a grain of salt. Now, the reason I'd say weather conditions are just looking up in general for this region is because we had tricky weather conditions yesterday, and firefighters really didn't allow the fire to grow. So while there are going to be warm temperatures, gusty winds, and low humidity the next 2 days, if they could handle it yesterday, I think they could handle it today. Where I do worry a little is once that cold front moves in, could see some 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts, and that is certainly going to be tricky, especially for those containment lines on the north side of this fire. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is the August complex, and I actually have some great news when it comes to this one. Where there is some bad news is the fire has continued to spread to the west and to the north, and it is currently threatening some structures. So I know CAL FIRE is working hard, especially on this western edge, in structure protection and getting some new lines in. I know they've actually been fighting fire with fire for the August complex. They've been creating a line and then actually setting fires out in front of it to burn some of the vegetation so that by the time the main fire gets to it, there's no more vegetation to burn. On the eastern side of this fire, you can see there's really no more hot spots, and that's where a lot of the containment has come from this fire, as they've been basically just mopping up. Now, when it comes to the numbers, the first thing you'll notice is this fire is actually down 100,000 acres. Now, while that doesn't really seem possible, it's due to better infrared mapping, and so that's some great news there. It's down 100,000 acres from what it did look like had burned yesterday. That's also some great news. We're up to 30% containment, so that's certainly encouraging, and I think we're going to continue to see more containment in the next day. The one other thing I will say for this fire is as the smoke clears, they're going to be able to resume aerial operations. And that's huge for this fire because it's burning in really steep terrain that's basically inaccessible to firefighters. So the aerial operations is huge in putting out some of these hot spots. So just getting a wide view of all the fires going on right now, you can see although the acreage decreased, August Complex is still the #1 largest wildfire in the history of California. SCU and LNU, although they are still active, they're not really growing anymore, so they're likely to stay at 3 and 4 on this list. North Complex has moved up to number 8 on this list, and Creek Fire has moved up to 13, and these are going to be interesting to watch in the next few days as that increase in winds happens. Now, as always, thank you to CAL FIRE for all the amazing work you do. Thank you to San Jose State for basically teaching me everything I know about wildfire. And again, If you or any of your friends or family have been affected by these wildfires, my thoughts and prayers go out to you, and thanks for watching.